優しい日本語の文法へようこそ。
皆さんこんにちは。今日はデフォーム、連用形について勉強しましょう。
Today we're going to have a look at the te form, which is a really interesting and versatile form of Japanese verbs. We're going to start today by having a look at some of the uses of the te form, and the most common use is as a joining strategy to join two sentences with the meaning and. All you need to do is make the verb at the end of the sentence into the te form, and then you can join it directly to another sentence without using any other words like and. If you say
ています。
you're saying is doing, if you say
てください。
you're saying please do, and if you say
てもいいです。
you're asking for permission or giving permission. And lastly, we have this form,
てから、
which you can use to mean after doing something. In essence, what we are doing when we put a verb into the te form is we're taking the meaning of the verb and we're putting it into a neutral state, ready to be joined to something else to add an extra layer of meaning. And for that reason, we don't often see the te form on its own. Sometimes you will hear it in casual speech at the end of a sentence, but in that case, it is simply this pattern here,
てください。
and the kudasai has been dropped. So now that you know what the te form is, let's take a look at how to make the te form of our various verbs. So let's start by looking at our group 1 verbs. You may know them as verbs or,
五段動詞、
but you can see here that there are 5 different endings for the te form. And luckily, this is about as complicated as Japanese grammar gets. Now, sadly, you just can't choose any one of these endings and put it with any verb. There are some rules that govern which verb takes which ending. But for the moment, here are the 5 endings for group 1 verbs.
て、んで、いて、いで、して、
Here in our group 2 verbs or root verbs or,
一段動詞、
you can see it's very straightforward. There's simply one ending here.
て、
And for our group 3, our irregular verbs, the,
不規則動詞、
you can see the usual suspects, and we have one extra irregular verb in the te form.
して、来て、行って。
So let's start by looking at our group 1 verbs. Now, to make the te form of a group 1 verb, you need to look at the sound that comes before must. Let's have a look at a few examples of some group 1 verbs that have the same te forms. Now, here we have a verb with an I sound before must.
買います。
First step is to get rid of the must. And now, let's look at the te form of this verb.
買って、
You can see we are replacing the I sound before must with a small tsu and te. And here are a couple of other verbs that make their te forms the same way.
待ちます。待って、座ります。座って、
So you can see that these verbs here have the ending
て、
for their te form. Notice that here we have the small tsu, which means that we don't actually pronounce that tsu. It simply means that we say it as though it was a double T E here. So the first thing you need to do when you're making the te form is get rid of the must. Then, if the sound before must is an I, a chi, or a ri, we simply replace that sound with a small tsu and a te. Moving on, let's have a look at some other kinds of verbs now and our second te form ending.
遊びます。遊んで、飲みます。飲んで、死にます。死んで。
You can see here, same thing, we get rid of the must, and for all group 1 verbs that have a pi, a mi, or a ni before must, we replace that sound with a nde. And here's our next section.
聞きます。聞いて。泳ぎます。泳いで。話します。話して。
So verbs with a ki before must go to
いて、
gi before must go to,
いで、
and shi before must goes to.
して。
So those are the 5 endings for our group 1 verbs, and which one to choose depends on the sound before must. Let's move on and have a look at our group 2 verbs.
います。いて。見ます。見て。食べます。食べて。
Very straightforward here. Simply remove the must and replace that with our simple te. And here we have our irregular verbs. Now you will know that shimas and kimas are always irregular, and here we see their te forms.
します。して。来ます。来て。
In actual fact, they're very straightforward. It's just the same as the group 2 system in this case. But look here at this verb and its te form.
行きます。行って。
Ikimas is a group 1 verb, and so we might expect for the te form to be replacing the ki with ite. But with ikimas, it's that first strategy. We get rid of the mas and we use the ending te instead of the ki. So here's a table summarizing the whole te form system. We've been working from the must form in this video, but you can just as easily make the te form from the dictionary form by focusing on the sound at the end of the group 1 verbs rather than the sound before must for those verbs. So that's the te form system. Some people are a little bit nervous about the te form because of all those endings in the group 1 verbs. Now, there's quite a lot of support material out there to help you remember this system for the te form. There are songs, and if you look on YouTube, there's a number of interesting videos. Tomita Sensei has very bravely volunteered to sing a little song that we use in our classes to help you learn the te form. So here is Tomita Sensei singing the te form song for you.
一理って貧民人で聞いてぎいでしますしてきます聞いていきますいて
And so that's the te form. The important thing is with your group 1 verbs to remember that it all depends on the sound before must. So you need to focus on that and then remember what is the te form that goes with that particular sound. It's a very common mistake for people to just use the group 2 strategy of taking away the must and putting on a simple te, or to use the first strategy of small tu and te with every group 1 verb. So as long as you remember to take a little bit of care there, you can't go wrong.
皆さん、テフォーム連用形わかりましたか？慣れればすぐできるようになりますよ。頑張ってください。